minute. Yes, this is about serial killer psychology. So if you are sensitive to a whole bunch of things, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of topics that may or may not be a trigger warning for you. So if that is the case, do what you got to do. There's plenty of other stuff to do in here. But we're going to talk about some things. We're going to talk about psychology. We're going to talk about people and some of the fucked up things that they do. There are plenty of them out there. They are everywhere. There might be a couple in the room, which is, I mean, if you didn't see, I have a shirt on that says, I'm a psychopath. What's your excuse? So I wear that for my talks. But on top of that, this is really funny. We just got denied for some surrogacy stuff because somebody didn't pass the psychological exam. I'm not going to say it was me, but there's a good possibility that it was me. So it's funny, when I took that test, and I wasn't going to mention this, but I'm going to mention it anyway. When I took that test, I was in a really good mood that day, right? I drank a whole bunch of energy drinks and I'm doing the test, and they're asking you, like, do you make friends easily? I was like, hell yeah, I make friends easily. They were like, do you believe all your ideas are good? Hell yeah, every one of my ideas is great. So I answered all of those questions really affirmatively, and I'm thinking that's why they think I have a personality disorder. Could be. So I think I fucked all that up. But you know, we got to talk to them next week. We'll see what happens. That's two F-bombs. So if we don't get to at least 30, I didn't do it right. There's another one in the back of the room. I love it. All right. So we're gonna get moving on this because I know, what time is it? Anybody got time check? Right now. Look at that, baby. We ready to go. All right. So I am Jeff Ignatowski, if you didn't figure that out already. Up here, we're going to talk a lot about Steve Gianangelo. Really good friend of mine. He is a professor at the University of Illinois. He does serial killer psychology there. He literally wrote the book for the FBI on the psychology of the serial murderer. So if you guys have visited my booth upstairs, I have Killers the Card Game. So that game, he actually took it and uses it to teach his students in his psychology classes. So really cool. I honestly never thought that would be a thing when I started out doing this, that it would end up being stuff that they use in a college course to help people understand psychology, even though that was the original intent of why I created the game. So with that being said, hey, look, we're moving. All right, so we're going to talk about a few things, and I realize I have 45 minutes, or a little bit more. I got to move quick. So we're going to talk about what causes people to commit serial murder. That is not what I wanted to do. All right, let's see. Hey, there we go. Gotta figure out where to press the buttons. So could it be? Could it be me? So that is the major question that got me involved in all of this. Right, so I'm going to tell a whole bunch of stories about myself because I come from this from a unique perspective. And the truth is that any one of us in here could commit murder. It only takes the right stimulus for that to happen. Because I promise you, if somebody took your job away tomorrow and you had no way to make any money and no way to feed your family, you would do what everybody else would do, and you would either take care of yourself or you'd find a way to get it, right? We would all do that. That's part of life. We have certain human needs that drive our behavior. Does that mean you are a serial murderer? No, because that's completely different, right? There are plenty of people that walk in on their spouse that has, they walk in and they're fucking some other guy. There's number 4 or 5. Yeah, you're getting up there. So if that happens, how many people have you heard that go and kill everybody in the room, right? It happens. Anybody could do that at any time. It just is a matter of stimuli. So the next thing we're going to talk about a little bit is how you can identify a potential offender, which is important because I don't know about you, but I'd like to understand people around me a little bit better so that I am not a victim of things that happen. Another reason why I created the card game that I created. So, maybe. Maybe not. I do. Okay, there we go. So all those guys look the same. That's the whole point. Everybody looks, you can't really tell who's a potential offender by looking at them. You can't, even the people that live in your own house, right? We don't always know what people are thinking because none of us are mind readers. And maybe there are some here. We got some psychic people upstairs. They might be able to do that. From what I understand, that's not really how it works. So with that being said, like, I can't read anybody's mind. I don't know what you have in your head or the struggles that you're going through or the trauma that has happened in your life that could put you into a position where you might have some kind of trigger and shit happens and a whole bunch of people disappear. So, you don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. But there are some indicators that you can look at. There's a show that I love to watch that in the beginning of it, it has like the credits and it talks about there are always signs, right? Evil lives here. Great, great show. And there are always those things that you can look at, but sometimes they're so disjointed. And what do you hear at the end of that all the time? People say, man, I would have never guessed it would have been him. Or I would have never thought she would do something like that. But it happens, right? So it's really hard to understand. It's really hard to see unless you know people. So a little bit about me. I worked over 10 years as a counselor with kids in the Kentucky Department of Juvenile Justice. So I worked for 8 years with DJJ here in lovely state of Kentucky. Spent a lot of time in Frankfurt, which was kind of cool. Not really. Not the greatest. But I also created Killers a Card Game. I also worked another 4 years for a children's home where I did counseling for the kids there. So I did a lot of my work in child psychology, which was a lot of fun. I did that because I was really fucked up as a kid, right? I went through a lot of trauma growing up and was dealt with a lot of abuse and things like that. So it just seemed natural to me to go and talk to other people about some of the shit that they deal with because I've already experienced it. It's kind of like that whole thing, like if you're an alcoholic, you don't want to hear shit from somebody who's never drank before. But if you know somebody that has drank and has struggled with that, you're more willing to listen to them, right? Same kind of idea. If we have trauma, what do you find is that people that have certain types of trauma tend to group together, right? They end up finding one another through all kinds of things. A lot of times it's horror, which is really funny. A lot of us are really messed up, have all kinds of trauma from all kinds of things. And we find each other at these kinds of conventions and the true crime conventions and stuff like that. And it's a beautiful thing when you find your tribe of people. It's very cathartic, very helpful. It's when you don't have that things get scary, right? I also fought professionally for a long time. So if y'all don't like what I have to say, you probably don't want to confront me about it because we may have other issues. So, and then I was an ultra endurance athlete. I used to go out and do all kinds of stuff. I did very long 60, 70-hour endurance events. Actually, I didn't even think about this. I'm wearing this today. And this kilt that I'm wearing is an Isle of Skye kilt. I did a endurance event in Scotland on the Isle of Skye. So I earned this. I am Polish, Filipino, and German, not Scottish at all. However, I earned my kilt. I'm just saying. I did that and had a lot of fun doing it. All right. So when I was growing up, I grew up in the 80s. I'm now 42 years old. So I grew up, literally, I was born 1980. When I was growing up, the big thing was the McDonald triad, right? So they used to say that this was the thing that was the indicator of all serial killers. So the McDonald triad is abusive animals, bedwetting, and the third one, why it doesn't come up right away, is fire starting. I did all three of those when I was a kid, right? I wet the bed until I was 13 years old because of all the abuse and stuff. And I mean, I don't drink very much anymore, but probably if I drank, I'd probably do it now, you know? But so would everybody else, don't lie. Abusing animals, I did that when I was a kid. I actually got a bite on my face. There's a scar somewhere. My grandfather's dog, I covered the dog in oil and was chasing in the car and bit the shit out of my face. And I had to go get a shot, a tetanus shot in my ass. It was great. I think I was like 12 or 13 years old then. And then fire starting. You know, we used to always play with that stuff, start fires in the garbage cans and stuff like that. But this used to be what everybody said was your indicator of a serial killer. It is now not the case. They do not believe that is the case. This is the indicator of violent behavior, specifically in children. If you exhibit any or all three of these specifically, you are going to be a violent person. Again, if you didn't see that, I fought professionally. So just saying I was violent most of my life. Thankfully, I'm retired now. It's kind of nice. I don't have people punching me in the face all the time. It's good. Even though back then I loved it. I don't know what happened. I got soft, right? Now I don't like it so much. There is a little picture on there. You see Mickey Mouse. He looks really out of place on there, right? So here's a story I just started telling recently. This is a true story. But that happiest place on earth thing, and it says, that time Mickey saved my mom. So my mom was really, really super abusive to me when I was a kid, tried to kill me a number of times, tried to drown me. I still don't like swimming because I don't like water in my face because she used to hold my head under the faucet. So with that all being said, when I was a kid, I knew a bunch of drug dealers. I grew up right outside of Philadelphia, and actually, where's my buddy at? I don't know where he went off to. He had his computer in here and everything. Anyway, he also just came from Philadelphia to come for the show, but he knows like where I grew up and everything. But what's really funny about that is I had all those guys around me. They were all Colombian drug dealers, and so my mom was super abusive, and I asked them to blow up her car. So I was about 9 years old when that happened. And they came to me and they said, okay, next week, we've got everybody to come down from Philly. They're going to wire up her car and everything. The problem is that we were getting ready to go to Disney World. And so I wanted to go to Disney. I'm 9 years old, right? I wanted to go to Disney. And I said, okay, can you wait 2 weeks until we get back from Disney? And they said, this is not like a scheduling service. Like we can't pull those kind of resources. You either do it next week or you don't do it at all. And so I said, fine, don't do it. I want to go to Disney World. So we went to Disney. I love Disney. I still do. And that was the day that Disney saved my mom. So Mickey saved my mom. She's still alive now. Crazy as ever. Love her to death. It's funny because we're much closer. My mom still doesn't know that story. My dad knows that story. So it's really funny because I know one of these times she's going to listen to some of the interviews that I do where I talk about that. And she may show up at my house and I may not show up. Now you guys know what happened. So
your car might blow up.
It's possible. I don't know that she has the resources that I do, but I wouldn't put it past her. She knows some people. So she goes to New York all the time and gets all the handbags off the back of the truck.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
It's a legit thing, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so here's the real question, right? So what is it that changes our path? Because myself, clearly I was on the road to doing all kinds of devious shit, right? So what happens in the middle there that changes the direction and the trajectory of our lives? There's something that happens. And there's something that doesn't happen for other people that continue going on. What you see is, how many of you guys watched the new Halloween Ends movie? How many of you hated it? Okay, there were a lot of people that hated it, right? I loved it. I thought it was great. One of the reasons why I loved it is because they show Corey's descent into evil, right? So what you see with Corey is, and of course, if it was any other movie, people would be like, oh, this is a really good movie. But since it was a Halloween movie and everybody wanted to see Michael Myers, they don't want to do that. But Corey is descending into evil. You see all this terrible shit that happens to him. He doesn't really want to kill anybody. He's a victim of circumstance, right? Bad shit happens to him. He gets upset. More bad shit happens to him. Why the high school kids are picking on him and beat the shit out of him are beyond me. But the high school kids are picking on him and beat him up and everything. And he starts to lose it, right? He meets Michael. He descends further into evil. He starts embracing that side of himself. and then he goes on a kill happy spree of killing everybody, right? That is not really that far from the truth, right? It is, I had a bunch of people that I saw that said that, it's not realistic. The only reason why it's not realistic is because they don't know anything about psychology, right? It is a collection of things that happen throughout your life. It is not always one thing. When you talk to people who were over in war, right, that have PTSD from that, they may go 20 years and not have very many issues. And then one thing happens and it changes everything, right? So what is it that changes our path? What is it that makes us not go down some of those things? There's not always a clear answer. And we're going to try to talk about that a little bit, but I don't think there's actually an answer because it's different for every one of us. Sometimes it's friends that influence your life. Sometimes it's programs that you go to that change things. Sometimes you go to church and that changes things. Certainly that changed things for me for a long time. I pastored for 10 years. I don't any longer, but I did that for a long time. It also enabled me to learn how to do public speaking and doing things like this, which was very beneficial to me. So we're going to talk about psychopaths and sociopaths, often used interchangeably, right? Everybody says psychopath, sociopath. They're actually different. They're not the same. So they're, I already answered my own question. I should probably look at that first. I know where I'm going at least. So psychopaths, all right, I should actually look in here too. So I don't have that in here, great. All right, so it describes a subject with a lack of empathy and attachment to others while exhibiting manipulative behavior. So that is Steve Gianangelo's definition of a psychopath. So really, really accurate description. Psychopaths don't have any empathy. They really, really struggle with connecting with anybody. What you see in psychopaths is they are usually the loners, right? They can't connect with other people. They can't be normal in society. So when we talk about psychopaths and sociopaths, when we're looking at a sociopath, that's completely different. Even though they show a lot of similar traits, they are not the same. The main difference is empathy. Sociopaths can show empathy. They can also mask empathy, where psychopaths cannot. You think about like Jason or Michael, right, that kill indiscriminately. They have no feelings about it one way or another. Whereas you might have another killer that goes and kills and it really bothers them. Again, Corey, he struggles with all of the killings that he does until the end. Then he doesn't give a shit anymore. But he's made his full path into psychopathy. So this here is the actual test. And if you guys want to take the test, I usually give this out beforehand, but I forgot to bring pens. So they're upstairs at the booth. So anyway, if you want to grab one of these at the end, this is actually the hair psychopathy test. This will see, and it's a loose definition. It's actually what they use to determine whether you are a psychopath or not. They will have you take the test. They will do some discussion and some evaluation with you to see if it's legit and if you answer the questions to your best ability. But if you want one of those, come up and take it. It's a lot of fun. I will tell you that I score very high on the test, which is not necessarily a good thing. I'm about 4 or 5 points away from officially being a psychopath. Of course, again, when you talk about trauma, that changes things. And we are all filled with trauma, every single one of us. Nobody in this room escapes life without trauma. You're going to find it. It's all how you deal with it that changes things. So here's the different 20 questions that they have on there. It's glibness or superficial charm, grandiosity, continuing need for stimulation. If you haven't noticed, I always need stimulation. I'm always doing something. Pathological lying, which is not something that I do. Conning and manipulativeness, lack of remorse or guilt, shallow affect, callous lack of empathy, or parasitic lifestyle. It's always interesting to me, the fact that you always want to mooch off of somebody else. You always need other people to do things for you. Poor behavior controls. Maybe. There we go. Promiscuity. Early behavior problems, lack of realistic long-term goals, not something I experienced. Impulsivity. I got a lot of that. Irresponsibility, not another issue of mine. Failure to accept responsibility for actions. They usually have a lot of short-term relationships. Juvenile delinquency, which always makes me laugh because how many of you were juvenile delinquents in here? Yeah, I was right there with you, doing all kinds of wild shit. Revocation of conditional release. So that was the one that I looked at and I was like, what the hell does that mean? So basically what that means, if you were in a facility or some point and you get out, you go right back because you can't function in society, right? Criminal versatility. Lots of psychopaths are actually very criminally versatile. They might go and steal things. They may go and burn up things and do arson. They may go and rape people. They eventually will end up killing people, right? So here's another big question, and it might be next. I'm not sure. Oh, we're going to go into sociopath. Here's the other big question that I bet you is a slide that I don't remember. But not all psychopaths or sociopaths kill people. There are plenty of psychopaths that are super, super successful in business. Because there's one thing about business that you need to be able to do is shut off your empathy. You cannot, in business, give a shit about other people and what they think, or you will never make it anywhere. You can care a little bit, but when it comes down to it, you have a product to sell and you got to do what you got to do to make that product out, get that product out there. When you see super successful people in business, what you see is they trample over everybody else to get where they're at, and then they start giving back at the end of their cycle because they want to make up for all of that bullshit that they did in the beginning. Not that, oh, what is his name? I can't think of it. Richest man in the world right now. Well, second. Okay, Bezos is the richest right now. Number 2, who owns Microsoft? Bill Gates. There we go. Really good example of that. That guy can't function in society as a normal human being. However, he is really, really intelligent, super smart dude, very good at business. But what does he do now? He gives back to every organization that he can, right? What do you think he's making up for? All the terrible shit that he did to people throughout his entire life to get him where he is now. So don't tell him I said that because he's got enough money to put my lights out for sure. So, all right, sociopaths. In a nutshell, people with sociopathy may have little empathy and a habit of rationalizing their actions, but they do know the difference between right and wrong, right? So different from a psychopath who doesn't understand right and wrong and has no empathy at all, doesn't give a shit about how other people feel, how their own personal actions influence other people. With a sociopath, they do care. They understand the difference. They choose not to follow those rules. They choose not to do the right thing. So there's a choice in there, which makes them very different. Not all psychopaths, I knew it was going to be in there. Not all psychopaths or sociopaths are serial murderers, but all serial murderers could be psychopaths or sociopaths, right? If you find somebody that has killed a whole bunch of people, generally they're one of the two. They obviously have some kind of personality disorder or have more mental illness going on. All right. Serial killers, we're going to get into that. Let's see. Oh, so let me go back. Let's see if I can go back. Yeah. Nope, that I went forward. Oh shit. There we go. I screwed it up now. Sons of bitches. You would think.
Some business brothers.
We going forward. All right.
You got to talk real fast, catch up.
That's for sure. Let's see. It says double tap to rotate screen. There we go. I rotated. This should go back. That's going forward. Man. Yeah, we're now about 24 slides ahead. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Yeah, this is gonna be funny if I can figure out how to do that. Now, I hit TikTok on my phone. It's great. I don't know how the hell that happened. Zach Baggins is talking to me over here. It is amazing.
You're still playing.
I know. They're supposed to be back and forward. All right, here we go. You got something up here. Hey, there we go. Maybe I can figure this out yet. Oh, I see. Hey, look at y'all. Somebody's got better eyes in here than I do. That's for sure. All right. So, let's go.
That's my son.
So,
Can you drag on that side?
2 fingers.
Yeah, left side.
Left side over
Yeah.
here. Hey, y'all are so good. I appreciate you guys. Hey, there we go. All right, we'll go back there. And now let's see if I can. Where's that at there? Nope. It's over here, right? There it is. Nice. All right. So up there, we got good old Ed Kemper, H.H. Holmes, and Eileen Warnos. Jesus. It only took me to go all the way back there to say those 3 words. Jesus. Right. Oh my God. Sorry. Yeah, did you say they all have mustaches?
Yeah, they do.
Nice. So we've all got the power in our hands to kill, but most people are afraid to use it. The ones who aren't afraid control life itself. Old Richard Ramirez. If you come up to the booth, I got a big thing of Ramirez. He's not wrong, right? One of the things that Bundy said is that when you watch the light go out of somebody's eyes, you are God, right? Scary, but it's the truth, right? For that person, you are. Just because they killed a whole bunch of people doesn't mean they're wrong. Still really fucked up. But the fact that they have gotten themselves into that position changes things, right? So Ramirez, and let me say this before I even go on, all of these guys, complete pieces of shit, right? Had some really, really significant issues. Lots and lots of trauma in their life that brought them to that position. Lots of mental illness. And we'll talk about specific killers here in a minute. But yeah, not in any way glorifying anything that they do or said, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong. And if we don't listen to what they said and how they say it, we miss the whole point. And then we run the risk of dealing with the same shit over and over and over again. If we can understand why people are doing what they do, then we can stop and prevent things. But if you're unwilling to even look at it, and we run the risk right now of being a culture that wants to close their eyes to everything. And that is some scary shit. Because if we close our eyes, I don't know about you, but I can't see in the dark. I don't want to be in the dark. I want to know what's going on around me. I want to understand it. So I do things like this to make sure I understand, at least to the best of my ability. All right. This is a lot of the stuff that Steve talks about in the book. Nature versus nurture. There's your first thing that happens. How do we construct a serial killer? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it something they were born with? Or is it something in the environment that they grew up in? Now, what I'm going to tell you is I believe that it's both. I believe that they grow up with some serious issues. I believe that they also were born with serious issues. And there's a lot of information that supports that, right? When you look at someone who commits serial murder, it is not one or the other. It is both. Most of them are mentally ill to begin with. They have some significant issues. Maybe they were schizophrenic, right? Maybe they had some kind of genetic disorder that was passed down. Ed Kemper is an example of that. There is a study that suggests that if you have an extra Y chromosome, that you are more predisposed to killing people. There is a lot of research behind that. So is that true? I don't know, but there's a lot of research. I didn't do it. They did. But, you know, it's out there. several genetic disorders that cause some mental illness to be passed down, schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder can all be passed down. And then the third one there is really nurture. It's trauma to the brain, right? We see that a lot in Gacy, Ramirez, Berkowitz. All of them had significant head trauma growing up. Now, what's interesting about that, I say that, but they also have Gacy's brain, right? There's a lady that has it, and when they studied it, they found that there were no abnormalities in his brain. So he had head trauma, but his frontal lobe or anything wasn't black. It didn't look like somebody had kicked him in the face 3 million times. But then we have people like Aaron Hernandez, right? They go and kill their whole family. That they go and they do all these studies, and now we can do the the different brain scans and stuff that they couldn't do back then. And they find out that his brain is all kinds of fucked up. Same thing with Chris Benoit, right? He's got all this head trauma, and they find out after he's dead that his brain looked like it was a 90-year-old man with dementia. So there is something to it. There is something that changes the chemistry in our brains and all the electrical synapses that change when you've been hit in the head a whole bunch. Not saying that I fought for 25 years and that I have a whole bunch of head trauma. Just saying, it could be possible. So, I really did hit the first one. All right, continuing on with that, environmental components. So there are a lot of environmental things that happen that cause people to commit serial murder. This is where we're talking about a trigger, and this happens to every single person that commits serial murder. There is a trigger that happens that changes everything, that kicks it all off. With Bundy, you have his girlfriend that broke up with him, right? And he never was right after that. And then all of a sudden you see that he starts killing these women that look a lot like her, and it just continues to go on and on. And so you have your nature, who you are as you grew up, all of those things and what you were passed down from your family. You have your nurture. You have how people treated you when you were growing up, because we find out that 80% of who we are was founded before we were 6 years old, right? It's our childhood formative years that really give us our personality. And you will struggle with the trauma that you dealt with as a child your entire life, right? If mom told you you're ugly and that you're too fat and you can never lose weight and no one will ever love you, you hear that shit in your head for the next 50 years, right? And all of us know that's true, right? But it's those formative years that we grew up. It's how the experiences as a child shape us. It's not always bad, though. Because if you're a person that can deal with that and you can learn from that, you can change it and you can flip the script a little bit. But that is where other people, and specifically killers, can't. They can't change the paradigm. They're stuck in that and they hear it over and over again. And then they start relating all of those things. They start seeing it everywhere, right? So somebody over there doesn't want to date me. They must think I'm fat and I'm ugly. Right? And then eventually it becomes something else. Eventually there's a trigger that happens and they start to kill people. Self-esteem development is another one. And we're talking about that right there. If somebody is beating you down over and over and over and over again, eventually something is going to happen, right? People are going to strike back at some point. But then you have other people that instead of striking back to other people, decide to harm themselves. Right? So then you have eating disorders and things like that. So it's really interesting. People in human psychology are very different in how they respond to the same stimuli. We could go through the same thing and deal with the same parents, have the same influences, and one brother will go and kill a whole bunch of people, and the other one will go have a successful business. It's crazy how that happens, but it does. Up there it says, in his book, Real Life Monsters, I wasn't sure what that was. I'm like, what the hell is going on? All right. It says, along with physical abuse, the childhoods of most serial killers are filled with systematic emotional rape that harms their impressionable psyches. This injury prohibits them from developing a healthy sense of self and understanding of intimacy or feelings of personal esteem. Again, it's the stuff that happens when you're a kid that affects the rest of your life. Childhood is when these killers develop obsessive and distorted views of their own identities and their ever-increasing needs for control. Most have had little of any control over themselves or their surroundings as children, and the resulting fear and dread in relation to control issues is understandable, if not predictable. So, there is a fantasy life that happens when you experience trauma as a kid, right? Some people do it very healthy, and they use that to accelerate them in sports, right? Lots of people do that. Other people get into a fantasy life and they relate it to all kinds of other things. What you find out about killers, a lot of times they relate it to sex. So they end up having this very rich fantasy life around sexual objects or sexual things, sexual situations. For example, how many of you guys have watched the Dahmer show on Netflix, right? Clearly, Dahmer related a lot of things that he did to very sexual things. He had a mannequin, right? He obviously got very sexually aroused by somebody being unconscious, right? That was his thing. He related that from the time he was a child up until, when he started killing people, right? And eating them eventually. So, there is all kinds of things that happen that the brain chemistry. All right, come on. There we go. So sexual components, fantasy life, control, and lesser crimes. Some form of sexual gratification is also often a part of serial murder. There are a few killers that were not interested in sexual gratification at all. Somebody just asked me recently about that. And I gave them 3 or 4 different names about killers that were not interested in anything sexual. But that is not the norm. Most killers, it is usually for some kind of sexual gratification. All right, and a deviant consuming fantasy appears to be the fuel that fires the process. Serial killers seem at an early age to become immersed in a deep state of fantasy, often losing track of the boundaries between fantasy and reality. The dream of dominance, control, sexual conquest, violence, and eventually murder. So it is a thing. So again, control is everything to a serial murderer. They have to control the situation. They have to control the person. They have to control the life and the death of that person. It's all about control. So be really scared when you deal with people that have control freak issues, because they may be close. Never can be too sure, but it really is. It's all about control for them, whether it's sexual or not. This is Steve Gianangelo's definition of a serial murderer. It is an offender who actually makes repeated physical affirmative steps towards killing other human beings to satisfy a psychological need. Again, not necessarily pigeonholing into a sexual satisfaction. There we go. Get it right eventually. So here's the other thing about that, is that it is no longer, it used to be that it was 3 or more killings with a cooling off period was your definition for a serial murderer. The FBI has changed that to 2, and I would argue that it is less than that. Now with all of our DNA and all of the different practices that we have, people are getting found earlier and earlier and earlier. They are not able to kill more than 1 or 2 people before they are caught. But does that mean that they are not a serial murderer? Because if they had the opportunity, what is the intent of what they're doing? Of course they would continue doing it because they can't stop, because it's now a compulsion. They have to continue moving forward. They have to continue doing that because they need to satisfy that need. The problem is, and this is what you find out, is that fantasy that they have can never be satisfied, which is why they continue to kill over and over again, because they're trying to satisfy that initial psychological need, but it's never good enough, and it's never as good as the first one. So they continue to do it over and over again out of compulsion because they're searching for that high, right? It's the same thing if you're doing drugs, right? You want to search for that ultimate high, but it never happens because it's not possible. But they can't understand that. All right, so 4 types of killers, and this is where we're going to speed up because I saw we got 7 minutes. 7 minutes?
Yeah.
Holy shit. All right, so we got 4 different major types. We got visionary killers, mission killers, hedonistic, and power killers. And then there are some qualifications under that. Visionary killers are typically psychotic and disorganized. They have serious mental illnesses. Richard Chase, somebody mentioned to him, to me at the booth today, that they really freak him out. So Richard Chase is a good example of that. He was Richard Chase was very psychotic. Who am I thinking of? Herbert Mullen is a good example of a visionary killer. He just died recently. Herbert Mullen was the one that believed that God was telling him to kill a bunch of people to stop the earthquakes. And then when they caught him, there was immediately an earthquake that day. No bullshit. When he died, I was wondering if there was going to be an earthquake. It would have been fantastic if there was one. Not that I wanted anybody to get injured, but I would have been like, dude, maybe this guy was right. Maybe he was doing a good thing.
Well,
Mission killers.
Gacy was executed, didn't something like Dahmer was born? Or
I don't know about that.
there's something odd about Dahmer and Gacy.
Huh, yeah, there's a whole bunch of
Oh,
weird
yeah.
stuff.
Yes, very.
So mission killers are very organized. They plan their crimes. They don't typically suffer from psychosis. They know exactly what they're doing. Mission killers, somebody like Jim Jones would be a mission killer, right? Even though he was trying to do something else, he ended up killing everybody anyway. They target specific groups of people. Another good example is John Paul Franklin, who was he was the racist killer, right? Killed specifically black people, right? Because he grew up with the Klan and everything else. Crazy, crazy guy. He is a good example of a mission killer. They typically kill quickly and efficiently. They don't like close contact. You get a lot of shooters that are missionary killers. The Beltway snipers, right? Those guys, missionary killers. They were trying to get rid of people because they wanted to fulfill their mission. Lust killers. They are the ones. Gacy is a good example of a lust killer. Same thing with Bundy. These are the guys that we really know. They rape, torture, and mutilate because it gives them sexual gratification. Right? They fantasize about violence. They have a hard time controlling their impulses. They often choke people to death because they want to have that close contact. All right, thrill killers. They get excitement from killing people. They enjoy the hunt. They get off on it. Let's see. Thrill killers, the Zodiac. Thrill killer. Classic thrill killer. Comfort killers. They're your poisoners, right? Women, typically, that want to kill for monetary need. Want to kill for wealth. Dorothea Puente, good example of that. She killed because she wanted to get Social Security checks, right? Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, bury him in the backyard. I actually met her nephew. They never went over to her house. Just saying. All right. Power control killers. These again, Bundy, Gacy are big power control. They fantasize about having power. Gacy is a really good example because he wanted to control everybody. The whole wrestling, right? The whole the handcuff trick. All of that is all about getting that power and that control over people. They often keep souvenirs. So 7 stages. You have the aura phase, where the killers get into their fantasies. The wooing phase, where they go at, or the trolling phase. Sorry, I read too fast. They try to figure out their perfect victim. That's when they're out looking for them and hunting for their killers. The wooing phase, they only organized killers do this. Israel Keyes, good example of that. Very smart guy. He tried to talk to his people and get them where he wanted them. The capture phase is where they go out and they actually physically abduct people. Then you have the murder phase. Then they go through and they murder. The totem phase is when they take their trophies. Then they have the depression phase, and this is what we never really hear about, right? Most killers, when they kill, immediately after there is a letdown, and they really, really struggle. Some of them often try to commit suicide because they are struggling with not really what they've done, but they are struggling with the fact that it didn't meet up to their expectations, that they thought it was going to be something else. So once they fall out and they get out of that depression phase and they come up out of that, they realize that they have to do it again because they need to get it right. So those are your 7 stages for a male killer, not for a female, because females are very different than that. We really don't have any idea of why, typically why women kill.
We don't get caught.
Which is not true, because I got 70 of them that say different.
Have you ever watched that?
Oh yeah, it's wild. So here's the thing. We have lots and lots of things. A lot of these questions we can't answer because we don't really know why people kill. What we do know is that there's signs everywhere. And if we stay aware and we understand the process and why people do what they do, you can see the signs. You can figure out that even in yourself, because all of us have to take a really personal stance and figure out where we're at with our own personal trauma. So what I'm gonna tell you is deal with your shit, because it can get out of control real fast, especially when you start introducing drugs, drinking and stuff like that. Dahmer is a good example. Really nice guy when he wasn't drinking. As soon as he started drinking, wanted to drug people, fuck them and kill them. And then eat them, right? So, you know, it's one of those things. Figure out what's going on. Figure out what your trauma is, because it's important, right? Figure out what other people's trauma is. And if you see that, keep some healthy distance, right? Your gut will always tell you the best thing to do. If you feel funny around somebody, you should probably not hang out with those people. Like, don't put yourself in that situation, right? We are inherently equipped to do that. Well, what do we do all the time? We say, oh, it couldn't be them. And then we put ourselves right in that situation. So be aware of who you are. Be aware of your own stuff. Be aware of how that is influenced by other people. Stay away from that shit, because it's important. So where we at?
1 minute over.
1 minute over. I didn't do too bad.
No.
I'm usually
What's your
like,
booth number? Tell everybody, make sure they know where your booth.
yeah, come up, 513 is my booth. Come up and check out the card game. Check out all the stuff that we have. Currently, with the card game, we've got over 400 cards, 300 of those being killers. What I wanted people to understand is these people are around us all the time, right? And it is better to understand and have some understanding about who they are and understand some of the psychology behind what they do, than to just be like, hey, shit, I just got abducted. And now I'm in somebody's, tool shed chained up. That's bad. Don't do that. Don't end up in that place. Thank you guys for joining me.